Okay, let's take a deep dive into something truly fascinating today. We've got a stack of source material centered around the theme of Beyond Enlightenment.
That's right. And our source isn't just, one article. It's actually compelling excerpts from a book titled Beyond Enlightenment.
Ah,
Yeah, it's really rich with discussions, anecdotes, responses to questions. Gives us a very layered perspective.
right. So lots to dig into. And our mission in this deep dive really is to cut through all that material, find the absolute key ideas within this text. Things like, what is enlightenment according to this source? What's this beyond state it talks about? And, what practical insights can we pull out about awareness, love, the mind, navigating the world?
Exactly. We're here to extract those important nuggets just for you, drawing only from what's presented here.
Think of us as guides, then, through this specific landscape of ideas.
Precisely. It's about understanding the core threads, the surprising points this particular source lays out. We're not adding anything new.
Got it. So yeah, get ready to explore some concepts that really challenge conventional thinking, all presented through stories and perspectives that are, well, anything but dry.
Definitely.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Where should we start? Maybe with the foundation. How does this source actually define enlightenment itself?
A good place to start. Well, according to this material, enlightenment is seen as the absolute peak.
The peak.
Yeah, the utmost, the finest definition of your being. It's described as the height of all that's beautiful, immortal, blissful. It's presented as the highest possible experience.
Okay, but then here's where it gets really interesting and maybe a bit counterintuitive based on the title.
Right.
The source suggests that beyond enlightenment, there's no experience at all.
That's what it says. And the reason given in the text is, well, pretty profound.
Which is?
The experiencer has disappeared.
Hmm.
That state beyond enlightenment is presented as a kind of nothingness.
Nothingness.
Yeah, a point where there's literally nothing left to transcend.
Yeah.
Because the very entity that could experience or transcend, it's gone. Enlightenment itself, the experiencer, the experience, all left behind.
Wow. Okay. And the source tries to give us a handle on this, drawing a parallel from the natural world.
It does, yeah. It uses the analogy of black holes,
Hmm.
where stars disappear out of existence, and white holes where stars are born,
Uh-huh.
suggesting maybe there's a parallel in the universe for this kind of disappearance and emergence that happens beyond enlightenment. It's an analogy, of course.
Right, a way to conceptualize it.
Yeah.
So this beyond state isn't just about gaining something new. It involves enjoying the disappearance of individuality. That sounds strange.
It does sound strange from our usual perspective. But the source suggests you first see the beauty of individuality, your uniqueness.
Okay.
And then beyond that, you have to see the beauty of its disappearance, the silence that follows, that deep, abysmal serenity. It's presented as this profound internal shift.
A transition into a state where you aren't the center anymore.
Exactly. Which, if we think about it, leads to the question of how someone might even approach this kind of inner transformation.
Right. Does the source talk about that? Paths, maybe?
It does. It offers two main paths to inner understanding.
Okay.
The path of love and the path of awareness.
Okay, love and awareness. And are they presented quite distinctly?
Very much so. Let's take the path of love first.
How's that described?
It's called the easier path. Rosier, more innocent, simple.
Easier, okay?
The core idea is if you can become totally loving, completely surrendered in love, then awareness just blossoms naturally on its own.
Ah, so they're connected.
Deeply. The source views them as two sides of the same coin. You focus fully on one side, say love, and the other side, awareness, is guaranteed to appear.
Interesting. Okay, so what about the other path? Awareness.
This one's presented as, well, a little more arduous.
More difficult. Why?
The source suggests it might be particularly relevant for people who find it difficult to love. Perhaps their hearts have become, and this is the source's term, like stones.
Stones due to...
Due to difficult upbringings, maybe cultural conditioning, societal pressures,
Yeah.
things that might close off the heart.
Wow. And there's that striking metaphor the source uses, isn't there, about the heart?
Yes, that Tibetan anecdote, it's quite powerful. It says the heart used to be right in the center of the body,
Uh-huh.
but it's been constantly pushed aside by the mind. So now it's like it's waiting by the side of the road, getting no nourishment, no encouragement, only condemnation if you dare to follow it.
That really paints a picture of the struggle between, I guess, reason and feeling.
Exactly. And the source really digs into that difference, the disagreement between reason, the mind, and the heart.
Right.
Reason, the mind, it says, is good for understanding objects, for science, for research, for dead things, as the source puts it quite bluntly.
Dead things. Ouch.
Yeah. But it's described as impotent when it comes to living things, like love, peace, joy.
So the mind can figure out how to build a bridge, but it can't actually create happiness or love?
That's precisely the argument in this text. The heart is presented as the space where all that is beautiful and valuable actually grows. And the source laments that modern man has kind of forgotten the language of the heart. We're living in the desert of the mind, where nothing truly alive can flourish.
That's a heavy critique. A desert of the mind. Okay, shifting gears a bit, but related to this inner path, the source also talks about the master-disciple dynamic. How does it frame that connection?
It really emphasizes that this connection is intensely personal, individual.
Not like joining a club.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It explicitly states it's not organizational. Disciples might feel a deep friendliness, a lovingness towards each other, sure, but they're fellow travelers, not bound in some group relationship. The core connection is one-to-one, disciple and master.
And the master's role. It's not like a teacher giving lectures or a boss giving orders.
No, not at all. The source describes the master's role primarily as being a presence.
Just a presence.
Yes, it's not about active instruction or command. It's more subtle.
Which leads to this idea the source mentions, that it's a one-way street.
Precisely. Meaning the effort, the energy, it's all on the disciple side.
So the disciple has to do all the work.
In a sense, yes. It's about the disciple being open, being ready, available. The master's presence is likened to light. It's there, but you have to open your eyes for it to actually illuminate things for you.
I see.
The master is described as a silent help,
Yeah.
transforming without really touching, just allowing you to be whatever you can be without imposing anything.
Okay. And there's a key insight here, the source says. Don't get attached to the presence itself.
Right. Learn the knack. That's the word it uses.
The knack of what?
The knack of how you are opening, how you become available when you're in that presence.
So it's about my internal state.
Exactly. Once you learn that inner mechanism, that way of opening,
Mm.
you can practice it on your own, anytime, anywhere. The knack can't be unlearned, it says. You shift the reliance from the external figure to your own internal capacity.
That makes sense. Transferring the power inward. Does the source talk about stages, maybe? For someone on this path?
It does sketch out a kind of progression. 3 steps for the disciple's journey.
Okay, what are they?
First, there's the student, focused on the mind, seeking knowledge, still kind of on the periphery of their being.
Asking questions, gathering information.
Right, a student has questions, the source says, but maybe not yet a true quest. A quest comes from deeper, from the soul, from the roots.
Okay, so student first, then.
Second is the devotee. Here the focus shifts to the heart, moving towards the center, more feeling, less intellect.
Got it. And the third stage?
The third is described simply as disappearing in the master.
Disappearing. Like merging.
Essentially dissolving that sense of a separate self. It ties back to that Beyond Enlightenment idea, perhaps. Losing the individual I.
Wow. Okay, that mention of questions. The source has a really interesting take on questions and knowledge themselves, doesn't it? It suggests asking questions is incomplete.
Yeah, it's quite a perspective. The source posits that no question is ever truly complete, because ideally, its answer would already be contained within the question itself if it were perfectly formed. And it also notes that asking questions takes real courage.
Courage. Why?
Because it exposes your own ignorance. It's like, the source says, showing your wounds.
Admitting you don't know.
Exactly. Many people avoid asking just to seem wise. But the source argues staying silent only looks wise. Asking actually reveals your dark spots, the areas where you genuinely need light.
And it makes a distinction between different kinds of questions, too.
It does. There are questions from genuine ignorance. So those are, okay, they need that courage we just mentioned. But then there are questions that come from borrowed knowledge. The source calls these the worst kind.
Borrowed knowledge, meaning?
Meaning they aren't born from your own deep longing, your personal search. They're just concepts or doubts you picked up from books, from others, regurgitated stuff.
I see. Not authentic questions. And it even links some questions to our general state of mind.
Yes, it says many questions arise from what it calls normal insanity.
Normal insanity, that's quite a phrase.
It is. The idea is that these questions aren't uniquely yours, but they're shared because we're all sort of caught in similar patterns of thinking, similar anxieties.
So if my mind is just constantly churning out questions, chatter, what does the source say to do? Should I try and fight it? Stop it?
Actually, Quite the opposite.
Really?
Yeah. The advice is not to try and stop the mind chatter, but to simply ignore it.
Ignore it. How?
Cultivate indifference, aloofness. The source connects this to the Buddhist term upeksha. Be indifferent to the mind's noise.
And what does that do?
It makes the mind feel like there's nobody home to bother. Its energy eventually just dissipates because it's not getting any engagement. Fighting the mind, the source warns, actually makes it stronger because it energy.
Interesting. Be indifferent. Okay. And how does this relate to knowledge itself? External versus internal?
The source draws a really sharp contrast here. Collecting external information, borrowed knowledge. It calls that accumulating rubbish.
Rubbish. Strong word again.
Very. It contrasts that with meaningful understanding that arises from your own innermost being, after you discard the rubbish, essentially.
Is there an example?
It uses the example of the philosopher Croce, who apparently spent his life asking what is beauty. The source suggests he must have been blind in a way.
How so?
Because beauty isn't an intellectual concept you define externally. It's an inner experience. You feel it, you don't dissect it.
Got it. And this connects to its critique of education.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Modern education gets criticized for mainly testing memory, not real intelligence, which, the source argues, can lead to a retarded mind, one stuffed with data but lacking genuine insight or awareness.
So the source clearly separates mind and intelligence. They're not the same thing.
Definitely not, according to this text. The mind is presented as a mechanism, a complex system, yes, including conscious and unconscious parts, full of dreams, memories, experiences. But to reach real understanding, or what it calls no mind. Not unconsciousness, but a state beyond the mind's constant activity. You have to transcend this whole mechanism, reach the silent center of your being.
And intelligence.
Intelligence, in this context, isn't seen as a property of the mind or memory. It's described as a quality that belongs to awareness itself. Pure awareness is intelligence.
Awareness. Okay. Now, shifting to another really profound area. The source challenges some fundamental concepts, like reality, illusion, even death.
Yes, it makes a truly striking claim about death.
Which is?
It calls death the only illusion to be understood.
The only illusion.
Wow. The source asserts that life is the only reality, the only way. Understanding death as an illusion, perhaps through deep meditation where that fear dissolves.
Yeah.
That's presented as the key to living fully, without fear.
That's a radical perspective. And does it offer a way to distinguish what's real from what's, well, illusory or dreamlike in our daily lives?
It gives a very clear, almost practical definition.
Okay.
It says anything that comes and goes is a dream. Simple as that.
Comes and goes, like thoughts, emotions, situations.
Exactly. But anything that comes and never goes, that is reality.
Never goes. Like what?
Well, the source suggests true contentment, real bliss. If you experience a state like that which doesn't flicker or depend on external things, that's a taste of reality, not just a temporary gap between miseries.
Right. Not just the absence of bad stuff. And kind of surprisingly, it suggests that even looking at our own misery, that can be a form of meditation.
Yes, that's a key insight. It's not about trying to escape misery or constantly chase happiness. It's about understanding them.
No.
By seeing the superficiality of what we often call happiness, maybe seeing how fleeting it is, and contrasting that with the deeper roots of our anguish or discontent. That act of understanding, the source says, is meditation.
Okay. It also makes a distinction between regular dreams, like when we sleep, and something it calls a vision. What's the difference there?
A vision might look like a dream, the source explains, but it's fundamentally different in its origin.
How so?
A dream is presented as basically a mind projection, a thought taking a picture form. It doesn't have inherent validity, just psychological maybe.
Right.
A vision, on the other hand, is described as something that happens to you. It's not a projection from you. It comes from somewhere else, or arises spontaneously.
And how should you react to a vision, according to the source?
Don't analyze it. It warns that asking questions, trying to figure it out, can actually stop the happening. Just enjoy it, witness it when it occurs.
Okay, don't mess with it. This all seems to point towards finding the real you. But the source says you can't be given that.
Correct. Because according to this perspective, you already have it. You are the real you, fundamentally.
So what's the point of meditation or these paths then?
Meditation, in this view, isn't about building something new. It's described as a tool to help destroy the false.
Destroy the false, meaning?
The false personality.
Yeah.
The layers that society, culture, religion, education have imposed on you. All the conditioning. When that false stuff is cleared away, the source says, The authentic, innocent being that you always were simply arises naturally.
And nobody else can tell you who that is.
Nope, it's not information. You'll know it through your own direct experience. But the Source adds, it takes courage.
Courage for what?
Courage to be silent, to be alone, enough for that real self to actually surface from beneath all the noise.
And ultimately, the Source connects this back to happiness, right? True happiness is...
It's simply being yourself. Radically simple, yet hard in practice.
Why hard?
Because, the Source contends, society constantly forces us to pretend, to be something we're not. And that pretending leads to immense misery.
So happiness is just authenticity.
Pretty much. Bringing your own unique flowers to the world. If you're a marigold, be a marigold. Don't be miserable trying to produce roses just because society seems to demand roses. Be authentic.
This leads us nicely into the Source's, well, pretty pointed critiques of society and conventional thinking. It talks about a burden we carry from the past.
Yes, it speaks quite strongly about suffering under a wrong heritage, passed down through history.
From where?
Particularly from established religions, moralists, traditions. The Source really emphasizes the need to free yourself from this burden. All the imposed guilt, the concepts of sin if you want to live peacefully and authentically, just as a human being.
And society itself. It
Yeah.
uses a pretty strong word to describe it.
It calls it almost weird.
Weird, why?
It observes how people often hide their, say, less acceptable tendencies, their criminal side, perhaps, while pretending outwardly to be saints. This constant internal battle, fighting against your own nature, that's seen as a great source of misery.
And judging others.
That also creates anguish, the Source says, but within the judge, not just the judged.
It also has some advice or maybe criticism about how we approach goals and preparation.
Right. Setting huge distant goals, like saying, I'm going to walk 10,000 miles, is seen as overwhelming, impractical.
So what's the alternative?
Take one step at a time. Focus on the step you can take right now. And it also critiques the habit of constant preparation for the future.
Preparing for the future seems sensible, no.
Well, the Source uses this funny anecdote about a man preparing meticulously for his death.
Okay.
But he still packs a tiffin box, a lunchbox, just in case the train taking him to his final destination is delayed.
That's absurd.
Exactly. It highlights the absurdity of trying to prepare for an unknown future while completely missing the only moment you actually have. The underlying question is, preparation for what, when the next moment is utterly uncertain?
Good point. And what about being a critic? Complaining?
The Source is quite dismissive of that. It suggests becoming a critic or a complainer is often just a cheap way to appear wise or intelligent.
Without actually being so.
Yeah. It tells another story about a professor who would criticize books, even books that didn't actually exist, just to show off. It suggests criticism often requires no real insight, just negativity.
Okay. And this ties into the idea that many concepts we hold dear aren't really ours. They're imposed.
Absolutely. Concepts like having a separate soul or feeling inherently unworthy. The Source argues these aren't things we discover inside ourselves.
So where do they come from?
They're presented as ideas imposed by external systems, religions, societies. The Source uses strong language, calling them social parasites sometimes, whose aim, it claims, is to create compliant slaves.
Wow. So unworthiness.
It's just a concept to be dropped. Because existence, according to this viewpoint, only creates beings who are inherently worthy. Needed even. If you exist, you're needed.
This skepticism about external stuff, it extends even to facts, right? The Source says something really radical about facts.
It does. It says quite directly, don't be bothered about facts.
Don't be bothered about facts. How can that be?
Because facts, it argues, are endlessly interpretable. They can be twisted to support almost any viewpoint you want.
Can you give the example it uses?
The crucifixion of Jesus. For Christians, that fact is interpreted as him suffering for humanity's sins. But for others at the time, or even some interpretations later, the same fact was seen as punishment for his own past actions or crimes.
Right. Same event, totally opposite meanings.
Exactly. It highlights how subjective our interpretation layer is, even over apparent facts.
And the Source doesn't shy away from mentioning real-world conflicts either. Conflicts with society, government, implicitly referencing maybe the community's own experiences.
It touches upon them, yeah. Without going into extreme detail in these excerpts, it describes actions taken against them as, undemocratic, hypocritical, driven by vested interests and different interpretations of events.
But the focus isn't on the conflict itself.
Not primarily. The emphasis seems to be on the importance of the individual or the community staying true to their own inner path, their own values, despite that external pressure, despite the conflicting interpretations coming from the outside world.
Okay, so bringing this back to the individual's journey, the Source really stresses living fully in the present, getting beyond the mind's limits.
Definitely. It shares that simple secret attributed to Henry Ford about opportunity.
Which was?
Keep jumping. Don't stand still. The Source links this jumping to being fully in the present moment, always available, always ready for what's happening now.
The power of the here now. That seems like a core theme.
Huge theme. The Source explains that when you withdraw your energy from dwelling on the past memories and projecting into the future imagination, you don't become weaker. No, you become a tremendously intense energy, focused, like an arrow aimed at the present.
And that focus is key.
It's the only way, the Source says, not to miss the train of life. Because every single experience, every real moment, demands your full presence right here, right now.
And part of being present is shifting from becoming to being.
That's a critical distinction the Source makes. It states it very directly. You are already where you want to be.
Already there.
Yes, you are already that which you are thinking to become. Becoming is a disease. You are a being.
So enlightenment or God or whatever,
Right.
It's not a goal to achieve way off in the future.
Exactly. It's not an achievement. It's something you realize you already are. The striving to become something else that's presented as the actual problem, the disease.
Oh, wow. Okay. And finally, beyond the mind's limits, beyond these diseases of becoming, the Source talks about a harmony of opposites.
It does. It uses these figures. Zorba.
Zorba the Greek.
Yeah, representing the lover of life, dance, joy, the earthy celebratory energy, and Buddha.
The enlightened one.
Yeah.
Silent, aware.
Right. And the point is, beyond the mind's tendency to split everything into categories, these aren't enemies. They're not antagonistic. They are two aspects of one unified existence.
It's like that rosebush analogy it uses.
Exactly like that.
Yep.
A rosebush needs the beautiful flowers, yes, the part we see and admire,
Mm-hmm.
but it also needs the unseen roots, deep in the dark earth, drawing nourishment. Both are essential. Everything nourishes the whole totality.
And this applies to people too, men and women.
Yes. The Source suggests men and women need to share and integrate qualities often stereotyped as belonging just to one or the other. Flexibility is key, not rigid roles.
It sounds like the Source is really encouraging a kind of creative approach to living.
Absolutely. Life isn't meant to be a drag, it suggests. If it feels like one, it's because you haven't learned the art of making it a joy. A piece of art.
So be creative with your existence.
Yes. And the aim isn't perfection, not trying to create some finished static painting.
Yeah.
No, keep the painting of your existence always growing, always adding new colors, new flowers, new foliage. Don't let it become perfect and finished. Keep it alive, flowing, growing.
It's a beautiful way to put it. Okay, so let's try and pull these threads together from this really rich deep dive into Beyond Enlightenment.
Quite a journey.
Yeah. We've gone from the peak of enlightenment itself and then this mysterious state beyond it. We explored the different paths, inward love, awareness, looked at the master-disciple dynamic.
Grappled with the nature of the mind, questions, knowledge. Considered how the Source frames reality versus illusion.
Right, and those critiques of society, the burden of the past. And finally focusing on the absolute power of being present. Being, not becoming.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because the source material itself actually includes specific questions from people, questions that might resonate personally with you, the listener.
Like what kind of questions?
Well, things like feeling a really powerful love and gratitude, maybe towards a teacher or master figure, but still feeling this nagging sense of searching, like something's missing.
Okay, that sounds relatable.
Or maybe experiencing fear when the old false self starts to dissolve, that feeling of losing your ground.
Yeah, that can be scary.
And also the experience of not necessarily seeing a master externally anymore, but instead finding this vast, loving space opening up inside you.
And does the source offer insights into those specific experiences?
It does. On the first point, about love plus searching, it suggests that powerful love and gratitude you feel, that is actually all that's needed. The searching part is the problem. That's the mind still looking for something else, something more.
Ah, okay. So trust the love. What about the fear?
The fear when the false self disappears is presented as very natural. Understandable even, because society conditions us against authenticity. So when the real starts emerging, it feels threatening to the old patterns. But the source says it's actually a positive sign. It means the real you is breaking through.
Okay, so fear can be a sign of progress, paradoxically, and the inner space.
Feeling that vast, loving space within rather than needing an external figure to focus on, that's seen as a really significant sign you're moving in the right direction. It means you are beginning to become that space yourself. You're finding the master within.
So the core message that really emerges for you, the listener, from wading through all this, it seems to be that your own inner experience, your own being, that's the ultimate key.
Exactly. You're encouraged to trust that inner growth, trust that new quality arising within you. Understand that it has deep roots in your own existence.
This deep dive into the source material, it really challenges us, doesn't it, to look past all the borrowed knowledge, the societal expectations.
It absolutely does. It asks us to question our own fearful minds, to really trust our direct experience, and maybe consider that the greatest mystery. It isn't some distant goal or external truth we need to find out there.
But maybe it's something that's already right here, residing within us, just waiting to be recognized and well-lived.
Beautifully put. Thank you so much for sharing this fascinating source material with us and for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thank you. We really hope these insights resonate with your own experience and perhaps give you something new, something fresh to reflect on.